Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second class in Florida Data Science Academy's Introduction to Data Science. I'll be your instructor, Dylan Sinnickson, and in class 2, we will be continuing our discussion with basic functions that are essential for understanding some basic statistical principles and performing some basic analyses in R. We'll also be loading some R packages, and we're going to be working with random numbers and doing some plotting later on in the course. So I'm going to start off by actually loading an R package. So if you want to load an R package, you go to the bottom right-hand panel and you click on Packages, and then we're going to click Install. And the package that we're going to be loading today is the zoo package. So what I'm going to do is just simply type in zoo in this packages window, and we can click on zoo and then install it. And then you can see in our R console, R is working on loading this R package. And if you're not familiar, there are dozens of hundreds and hundreds of different R packages that are used in this programming language. And a package is essentially a collection of algorithms and functions that help us perform some different analyses and methodologies in R. So after we install our package, then I'm going to actually have to load it in. So to load an R package, I'm going to call the library function. You can see that when we type library, it shows up in blue. And then I'm going to type the function of interest, the package of interest, which is going to be the zoo package. And then I can simply hold Control and Enter, and then we can formally load in that zoo package. And the zoo package is going to help us work with dates and times in R. So after we install and load that R package, then I'm going to write a note to myself, which is going to be called simply class 2. And then I'm going to write another note to myself, which is going to be more basic functions. And the first task that I'd like to work on today is I need a vector of 10 100s. In this first task that we're going to work on, I just simply want to repeat the number 100 10 different times. So what I'm going to do is give myself a little bit of space, and I'm going to create an object called hundreds, which is going to store a vector. So essentially just a sequence of numbers. We're going to hopefully store the number 100 10 times. And in order to do that, I'm going to use the repeat function. So we're going to, it's actually formally known as the rep function, but it stands for repeat. So the first argument of this rep function is going to be the number that I want to repeat, which is going to be the number 100. And then I'm going to use this each argument, which is going to signify how many times I want to repeat the number 100, and that's going to be 10 because I want to repeat 100 10 different times. So I can hold Control and Enter on line 8, and we can see in the top right-hand panel, we have an object called 100s, and I can actually print it out here on line 9, and when I call the object hundreds, we see that the number 100 is repeated 10 times. So that looks good, and the next task that I would like to do is I want to create a vector of from 60 to 100 at intervals of 5. So this is going to kind of signify some realistic grades that you would find in a class. So you can think of this as maybe you're a teacher and you have a collection of grades in your class and you want to maybe perform some analyses in R. So what I'm going to do this is I'm going to call an object called grades, and I'm going to set it equal to this seq function, which stands for sequence. So we want to create a sequence from 60 to 100 at intervals of 5. So the first argument in the sequence function is going to be from, so that's where we're going to start our sequence, and then we're going to use the to argument, which is going to be where we want to end the sequence, and then we're going to use this by argument, which is going to be signify the intervals within our sequence. So if I run line 13, I can print out this object called grades, holding Control and Enter, or by clicking the run button, and you can see that when we run line 14, we have this object called grades, and it's equal to 60, 65, 70, and so on, all the way to the number 100. So looks like we've been able to successfully create a vector from 60 to 100 that is spaced at intervals of 5. So now that we've done some of those basic analyses, we'll move on to something a little bit more complex, where we're going to create random grades for 3 classes. So in this example here, this is not the most realistic scenario. Obviously, if you had if you were a teacher, you would have grades that weren't spaced out only at intervals of 5. You might have a random collection of grades. So let's create objects that signify random grades from 3 classes of 10 students. So in order to create random grades, first I'm going to create an object called class 1. This is where I'm going to store all of the grades from the first class. And I'm going to use this rnorm function. So rnorm stands for random numbers from a normal distribution. So if you're not familiar, a normal distribution is essentially a bell curve where you have most of your values centered around your mean, and then you have your standard deviation or your variance that signifies how narrow or wide your distribution is. So I'm going to use this rnorm function. I'm selecting random numbers from a normal distribution. The first argument is going to be how many numbers I'd like to select, which is going to be the number 10. And then I'm going to use this mean argument, which I'm going to set at 80. And then I'm going to use the SD argument, which stands for standard deviation. And I'm going to set that equal to 5. And actually, I want to do one other thing before I run this rnorm function. I'm actually going to set my seed. So the set seed function or argument is essentially is a helpful tool when you're collaborating with other people, or if you're taking a course or following along in a video such as this, where essentially it makes sure that all the collaborators are selecting the same set of random numbers. So I'm going to set my seed at 100, and then I can run line 20. We can take a look at the numbers in class 1. So we see that we have numbers 77, 80, 79, and so on. So these are random numbers selected from a normal distribution with a mean of 80 and a standard deviation of 5. So after we create the numbers for class 1, let's move on to class 2. Again, I'm going to set my seed. This time I'll set it at 200. Give myself a little bit of space here. And then I'm going to call this object class 2. Again, I'm going to use the rnorm function, selecting numbers from a normal distribution, and I'm going to select 10 random numbers. This distribution is going to have a mean of 70, and it's going to have a standard deviation of 2, so it's going to be a narrower distribution. And I also want to add another function to this argument on line 24. I'm actually going to use the round function. So the round function is going to turn decimal values into integers. So you can see in class 1, we had values that had decimals in them, but we're going to use this round function. And again, I think I covered this in class 1. When you have multiple different functions on one line of code, you always work in, out. So the first thing R is going to do is select the random numbers, and then it's going to work on the functions on the periphery, which we're going to subsequently round those values last. So I can run class 2, and then we can take a look at them, class.2, and we can see that we have values ranging from 68 to, I think, 73, and they're all integers because we rounded all of the values in this example. So that looks good. And now we're going to move on to class 3. So I'm going to set my seed again, and I'm going to call this object class.3. I'm going to also use this round function again, and then I'm going to use the rnorm function. We're selecting another set of random numbers. We're going to select 10 of them, and this is going to be our smartest class. We'll have a mean of 90 and a standard deviation equal to 4. So that looks good. And now I can type out class.3, and we can see that we have numbers ranging from 90, I believe, to 95. So we were able to successfully select those random numbers. So now I think we're going to move on to our first in-class assignment. Just going to type out in class assignment. So in this first class assignment, it's pretty basic. What I want you to do is I want you to find the sum, the mean, and the standard deviation of all three classes combined. So I want you to find what is the sum, mean, and standard deviation of all three classes combined. So you guys can pause the video now, work on this for a couple minutes, and tune back in, and I'll show you guys the answer. Thanks.